So, welcome back to the next session. This is the second week of the course, and in this week we have discussed about what are the different kind of changes that are happening. Basically, if you look at the changes that are happening is in the field of structure, system, technology, people and culture related changes. Now, we will discuss about these kind of changes, but before we move on to discuss what are the different kind of changes in terms of where the changes are applied, we will discuss the context and the importance of the change in strategic framework. So, what we are going to discuss is that before we go for looking into the change and think of identifying why we are going for a change, we need to look at the capability. So, here we are going to discuss about the change capability framework, where we are going to see that how the process of the change or the architecture of the change is going to be influenced by a number of factors, and this include the structure part. So, when you are going to bring about a change, you also need to see that how it is going to be influenced by the structure of the organization, or structure is going to influence this kind of change, whether this change is going to be in resonance with other changes which are happening. Similarly, whether there is a need to bring about a change in the culture of the organization, because you want to bring about a change in the organization, and also in the leadership, whether there is effective leadership which is being initiated by the top management to ensure that you are able to correctly identify the change and you are going to implement it successfully in the organization. And then what are the accelerators of the change? Accelerators in the sense that what are the factors which have proceeded, which have forced you to go for a change, right. So, looking into this capability framework, you need to identify especially the culture, structure and the leadership issues, and only then you can think about going for a strategic change, right. And then you also need to identify the forces. So, the accelerators may come from the environment, internal as well as external environment, right. And then you need to proceed further to see whether you are going to see where the change is going to happen. Now, the context is very, very important. What we have been talking about, say the accelerators. So, accelerators basically provide the context. Context in the sense in what context you want to bring about certain change. So, any kind of strategic change program which an organization is ready to initiate is going to be influenced by a number of factors. The time, at what point of time you want to introduce it, whether you are going to introduce it at a time when it is really required, or you are going to introduce at a later stage. So, it is important that you need to introduce any change program as and when it is required. Say for example, you find that your structure is not efficiently working, right. It is not helping organizations to go for better coordination vertically and horizontally. So, you need to bring about a change immediately, then and there you need to bring about some changes in your structure. So, the timing of bringing about any change is very, very important. Then you also need to decide about the scope of change, what is to be changed, whether you want to bring about a change in the culture, whether you want to bring about a change in the structure, whether you want to bring about a change in the technology or leadership. So, you also need to define the scope of the change, from where you are going to start the change initiatives. So, what we have discussed about the timing of the change and where you are going to introduce the change. Then the preservation, whether you will be able to sustain it or not, that is also an important issue. And then diversity. So, diversity means that what are the different kind of stakeholders who are going to be influenced by this kind of change program. And here when we are talking about diversity, it is not only the diversity of the workforce which is going to influence any successful change initiative, but also the different kind of stakeholders who are going to influence the organization. Different kind of stakeholders may include, say your vendors, suppliers, right. So, all external agencies and then internally your employees, right, and also among employees different type of employees at different levels across departments, right, who belong to different sets of, you can say, diversity factors like age, gender, because that is very important. Say who is going to accept change more readily, a young person or an old person, okay? Male or female, okay? More professionally more educated or less educated. So, all these factors of diversity are very important, because it is going to influence your any kind of change program which you want to initiate in the organization. Then capability. Capability here refers to what? The capability of the organization. Whether its organization is capable enough, whether it has resources to go for this kind of program, right. Suppose you want to bring about a change in the technology. Do you have resources to meet the technological requirement of the organization? Is organization capable enough in terms of resources, strength, so that it can cope with the external factors and come out with some changes, say technological changes, to ensure that this kind of change is going to be successfully implemented. Because if you do not have capability, even if you have defined your scope and you know that this is the right time to go for a new technology, it is not possible, because the resources are not there, right. Then the next factor is capacity, capacity of the people. Capacity of the people is very important, because ultimately any change program that is initiated, the success of that particular program is dependent on the knowledge, skill and competence of the people. So, if people are not competent enough, then it will be very difficult for the organization to go for any kind of change program. And then readiness. Then you have to see whether people are really ready, are willing to accept these kind of changes or not, because if people are not willing, then it may not help organization to succeed in any change initiative. So, the readiness of the people is very important, in the sense that whether there is going to be less resistance or more resistance. So, the leaders must be able to identify the level of resistance that is present or is likely to be there, and then how they are going to deal with this particular factor. Moving further, we are going to talk about another important factor, that the kind of power politics that is being played in the organization. What kind of power structure is there? It depends upon the level of decision making or centralization or decentralized decision making, right. Then the internal dynamics of the organization. Some people would like to go for this kind of change, some people would not like to go for this kind of change. So, they would create certain problems. So, you also need to understand the power dynamics and the politics that goes on within the organization when you want to initiate any change program, right. So, these are the various factors which are very important, because if you want to introduce any kind of change, you must keep in all these factors which are responsible for ensuring that the change program is successful. So, what we have discussed, the capability and the context in which the change happens. Now, look at the targets. What are the targets for the change? So, the targets could be at different levels. It could be at HR level, functional level, technological level, or at the capabilities level. Similarly, you can also define targets at 3 different levels, whether the change is to be brought into the individual level, or it could be at the group level, or it could be the organizational level, right. So, these kind of changes, for example, if you are talking about individual level, right, you are talking about the people related changes. Group level, it means that you want to change the group, their attitude, their behavior. Say for example, you want to have a good team. So, you want to bring about a change in the behavior of the team. So, that is the group level change, or when you want to bring about a change in the organizational level, right. Now, when we are talking about these 4 different levels of the changes, it talks about the scope of the change. The changes could be brought in the HR, right, when you want to bring about a change in the policy, systems and practices to manage and develop people. It could be also related to the function of the organizations, different kind of functions which an organization performs, then the technological capabilities and organizational capabilities. So, let us discuss it one by one, the different levels of changes. Now, when we are talking about changes at the human resource level, so what does it include? For example, you want to conduct a training and development program to ensure that the competence increases, or you want to go for a socialization program to ensure that yes, people are ready to accept the change in the culture, or you want to link performance with the reward to promote better performance among the organizations, right. So, there are a lot of changes that could be brought in at the HR level, or you want to bring about a change in the reward system of the organization, right. So, you are trying to link into the performance, you want with the objective to motivate employees for better performance. Similarly, you also want to bring about a change in the management team of the organization, right. So, that would alter the reporting relationship of the people, right. So, if these kind of changes which are aimed at people and how they are going to function in the organization, these kind of changes are coming under what you call HR changes, right. Coming about the other kind of changes that you want to bring in, like functional resources. So, when you look at functional resources, means that how resources are going to be utilized by the organization and the various departments of the organization, right. So, in the change environment, if you want to bring about the changes, so you also need resources which are very, very important, right. Now, these resources must be optimally utilized. So, you need to ensure that appropriate resources are utilized by the organization, and for that what you need to do? You need to ensure that how these resources are being distributed across departments, right. That is very, very important, because suppose you want to go for technological change, it means that you are going to allocate more resources for the technology, right. Suppose you know that you need to spend more money on people. So, accordingly you need to spend create more budget for people related changes, right. Similarly, the technological capabilities. So, the idea here is that if when you are talking about improving the capabilities in terms of technology, so you have to see that what kind of technology is being used by the organization currently and what kind of changes it wants to bring about the technology of the organization. The basic idea is that you can make use of this technology to create value for the organization, right. So, that you can have better market opportunity, better in terms of more share, more profit and these kind of things. Then the capabilities of the organization. When we are talking about organizational capabilities, basically you want to bring about a change in the structure and culture of the organization, right. So, you go for some kind of restructuring and re-engineering processes, which we will discuss in detail again. So, where we are talking about bringing about a change in the culture, it means that you want to bring about a change in the norms and values of the organization, right. And then you try to ensure that these norms and values are aligned or in tune with the goals and objectives of the organization. So, in what way these cultural values are going to help organizations to perform better. One example that I can give here is like State Bank of India recently went for a cultural transformation. The idea of this cultural transformation in State Bank was to develop those norms and values which are going to be more aligned to what you call performance. So, they try to examine and link whether bringing about a change in the culture of the organization, that is the values and the norms of the organization, would bring sufficient changes or significant improvement in the performance of the employees in the organization, right. So, they identified those designated norms and values. So, these espoused values were communicated to the employees and they were asked to imbibe them, so that these cultural transformations happen. As a result of these cultural transformation, State Bank of India was able to transform itself into a more productive organization. Similarly, when we are talking about structural changes could be of anything, where you are trying to reduce some departments, or you are trying to reduce the levels in the hierarchy, right, or whether you are going to change the reporting relationship, right. So, all kind of changes which basically affects the structure of the organization is related to structural changes. So, whether you want to bring about a change in the culture or whether you want to bring about a change in structure, both actually aimed at improving the capability of the organization to perform well, right. So, you can harness your HR and functional resources only when you are increasing your capabilities in terms of your culture, structure and technologies, right. So, moving further, we will further discuss again what are the different kind of changes that happens in detail. And here we talk about the technical changes. Now, when we say the technical changes, it means that you want to bring about a change in the way the output is coming out. It means that you are talking about the production process. So, when any organization wants to bring about a change in the production process, it means that the knowledge and skill base of the individual also go for a change, because in order to produce with a new technology, you have to see that what are the knowledge and skill that is required, right. So, you need to ensure that people have the competencies to work with the new technologies, right. The idea is that you can make use of this new technology to be more efficient, or you can produce in greater volume, because the idea of bringing a new technology is what? You are having a product which is more efficient. So, you are able to assure its accuracy, quality and efficiency, and you can also produce in more numbers, right. And what basically it includes it? The tools, equipments, the processes and how the work flows on an assembly line. So, all this could be a part of the technology, right. For example, you can measure how much time and movement is taken by a person to perform an activity on an assembly line, right. So, if you are using a new technology, whether this time and movement of the individual can be reduced, so that he is going to be more efficient. Since jobs are interdependent, so that he does his job faster and then the product moves to the next table or to the next person, so that he does his job, right. So, you need to identify what are the processes, equipments and the flow which is used in producing something, a good, say for example, right. One example that I have taken is a GlaxoSmithKline, as a pharmaceutical company. So, what they did basically, they developed a software which could help researchers to screen potential drugs for its possible adverse medical reactions. So, they could identify what could be the medical reactions of this drug on the people, right. So, that before doctors prescribe this drug, right, the software would be able to detect what could be the reactions for the people based upon his case history, based upon his reactions to various drugs of the people. Some people are more reactive to certain drugs. So, this software is in a position to identify what could be the possible reactions. So, it would help doctor to prescribe a particular medicine or not, right. So, the software is what? Software is a kind of change that you want to bring about, how you are going to prescribe a drug, that is related to the work method, right. So, these kind of technical changes are very important. Similarly, if you look at other kind of technical changes which has been brought in the either manufacturing sector or even the services sector, right. So, there is a new variety of technology that is being used today by the companies like customer relationship management. So, it is also a software which takes care of the customers, starting with what you call approaching a customer to closing the deal. So, everything is managed using a software. Now, you have an integrated say resource plan, that is known as enterprise resource planning, which basically tries to connect all modules or all parts of the organization to avoid duplicacy, and it also ensures that people are able to connect with each other more accurately using an IT system. So, when we are talking about enterprise resource planning, basically it is used to create more efficiency among the people. Then people are using wireless technology, so that it also helps people to communicate more effectively. Similarly, we have business process reengineering. In business process reengineering, the objective is to restructure each and every process. So, you look for start from the scratch and see whether any process, any business process, say for example, related to any function, with the production function or marketing function or HR function, how it could be improved further. So, you evaluate the business process and see what are the drawbacks of this process, what are the things that you need to drop, what are the things that you need to add, and accordingly you come out with a business process which is going to be more efficient. Then most of the companies today go for Six Sigma programs. Six Sigma programs are basically used to control the quality factor, right. So, that the defects in the product could be reduced to a great extent, right. So, most of these Six Sigma programs assure that your product is of to a certain standard quality, and that is why companies have gone for these kind of changes. Then in manufacturing sector, you will find that lot of changes are happening in terms of technology, like using computer aided design, computer aided manufacturing, computer integrated manufacturing, where basically everything starting with the designing a prototype to the final product, everything is being controlled and regulated by the computers. Then most of the companies are moving to a more flexible manufacturing systems, especially in case of manufacturing technology, so that they can produce what you call the custom based products in comparison to tailor based products. So, that they can meet the requirement of different customers and their needs and expectations. Then another important thing that is developing very fast in manufacturing sector is the use of information and communication technology, right, which give you feedback, which also acts as a control system for most of the organizations. And most of the organizations use ICT systems for data archiving, where like you have data warehouse, data mines, all kind of things are basically is a byproduct of what you call information and communication technology. So, that also helps you to take decisions and to decide what is to be done. So, you can see that there is a variety of technology starting with manufacturing, services and IT that is being used by the organization, and any kind of change that is to be brought in here is going to be a form of what you call a technical change. Now, moving from technical changes to another kind of change, that is product and services changes. Product and services change means that where you are coming out with a new product or new service of the organization. So, it is related to either a product or a service related to an organization. Both of them are outputs basically, right. So, new product could be say small adaptations to existing products. So, you are offering some product to add a new feature to that product, right, or you are coming out with a entirely new product. So, both are included, where you are going to modify a product or whether you are coming out with a new product at all. Then it is the objective of this product and service changes is to ensure that you are able to increase your market share or come out with new markets, new customers, because you are going to offer a product which is distinct or different from what others are offering, your competitors. Some examples that I have taken here like Toyota's Hilux truck. It was a new product which was designed to increase the market share, and that really helped them to increase their market share. Another example that I can give here is from Apple iPod, which is a new product which created a new market for the company, right. Then in context of India, we have Tata Consultancy Services. They came out with an IT enabled service. This is known as M-Krishi, and this is a service which basically delivers weather information and crop advice to farmers in rural areas via cell phone. So, you just download this app and you can get all the information, right. So, this is where you are using a technology to provide better services to your customers and clients, right. So, all these are examples of what you call the product and service changes. Moving further, we are going to talk about the structural changes, and most of these structural changes basically brings about a change in the structure of the organization. So, they are in the administrative domain, right. Mostly it is top down, because suppose you want to reduce the number of levels in the hierarchy. What does it include? It means that you are trying to reduce the communication gap, you are trying to be more less formal and these kind of things, right. So, it includes changes in the structure as well as strategy both, because if you are going to bring about a change in the structure, it means that you need to ensure that there is certain strategic alignment, or if you are to bring about a change in the structure, you need to ensure that it brings about a change in the structure of the organization also, right. Some examples that is given here is like 3M, which is on the top of the innovation index. So, they try to bring about a change in the system which was instituted by the top management in their Six Sigma program. So, with this Six Sigma program, they were able to improve the quality of the product to a greater level, right. For example, in ICU medical, they went for a different kind of working method, that was self directed teams, right. So, self directed teams means that the team which is managing itself. So, this is also known as self managed teams. So, everything is left to the team. So, they are going to decide what is to be done, how it is to be done, right, and they are responsible for the product or service which they are producing. So, from individual working they move to what you call a team working activities. So, this is a kind of system changes. So, structural changes are basically related to the system and the structural changes. Now, what are the different kind of structural changes that could be brought in? The first one is that when you are trying to bring about a change in the hierarchy of the organization, it means that you are trying to reduce the number of levels in the hierarchy, right. Then another could be like when you are trying to change the span of control. Span of control, that is how many people are being supervised by a person, right. So, you can make it broad or you can make it narrow depending upon the requirement. So, that is also a kind of change. So, most of the organizations today are moving from broader span of control, so that more people can be effectively supervised. Now, you see this hierarchy and span of control is very much related. For example, if you want to reduce the number of levels in the hierarchy, then accordingly you also move to have a broader span of control, because with less hierarchy one person is going to supervise more people in the organization. Then chain of command, right, the line relationship, who is going to report whom, that is very, very important. Similarly, also see that what is the process of decision making, whether it is centralized at the top or it you have a decentralized decision making system. What is the degree of formalization, the extent to which formal rules, regulations are followed or not followed. So, most of the effective organizations have moved to say less degree of formalization today, right. Then departmentation, what are the various departments, whether they are required or not. So, you also try to bring about a change in the horizontal structure of the organization. So, hierarchy talks about the vertical structure, where you try to reduce the number of levels in the organization, and when you want to bring about a change in the number of departments, it means that you want to bring about a change in the number of departments that exist in an organization, right. So, that is related to departmentation. Then the management systems, what are the different kind of systems that is followed by the management, right. So, these structural changes are important and organizations go for these kind of changes, and they are aligned in such a way, so that you move to become either a taller structure or a flatter structure. In other words, we call it either a mechanistic structure or an organic structure. So, when we are talking about organic structure, it means that you are trying to reduce the number of levels, a broader span of control, a decentralized decision making system, less formalization, less number of departments and better integration and coordination, right. Or if you are going to have a mechanistic system, then the just opposite of this happens. More levels in the hierarchy, narrow span of control, right. You have a centralized decision making, more formalization, rules and regulations are there, right. You have number of departments, you create all kind of departments depending upon your convenience, but that actually obstacles coordination both vertically and horizontally. So, if you want to create more efficiency, you need to ensure better coordination vertically and horizontally, and that is why you move from a mechanistic structure to a more organic form of structure. Then the different kind of strategic changes that happens is, especially when you are talking about strategic changes, that is mergers and acquisitions, where two companies merge with each other, then it is known as mergers. For example, company A and company B merge together to create another company, right. So, that is known as mergers, right, like HP Compaq. HP and Compaq have merged together to create another company, which is known as HP Compaq, right. Then acquisitions is a different thing, where one company, say company A is acquiring company B. So, company B does not exist, it becomes a subsidiary, a part of what you call company A. For example, when ArcelorMittal was acquired by Tata, so then it became a part of Tata group companies, right. So, these mergers acquisitions are also part of a strategic changes, and these strategic consolidations are made for strategic and financial integration. So, that you can increase your revenue, you can increase your market share, so that you have better control over the market, because you have more resources at your disposal. And these are the regions that you go for these kind of mergers and acquisitions, right. And it could be different kind of mergers and acquisitions, like you increase your capacity, right. You go for expanding your markets, you want to have new product, or you want to invest in the new market, or you want to develop your R&D capabilities, or it also creates some kind of leverage to the industries, right. So, that what you do not have, you get it. So, through acquisitions and mergers, basically you go for more integration of your strategies, so that you can better control the market, right. So, apart from mergers and acquisitions, let us see what actually happens, what are the key issues. The diagnosis in the sense you need to identify what is to be done, how and how it is to be done. Then what are the levers for the change, why we should go for these kind of things, then how it is going to be managed and who is going to lead and manage this. So, any kind of strategic change, it is very important to identify that how do you proceed with that one. For example, if you want to go for acquisition, right. So, you need to identify which company to acquire, why you want to go for it, how are going to manage this acquisition, who is going to lead and manage these kind of acquisitions, right. So, any kind of strategic changes need to be looked into from the process perspective, so that how it is going to be made successful, right. So, these are the key issues that is very important. Moving further, leadership also plays a very important role, right, because it is defined as a process of influencing an organization, right, so that you are able to achieve the goal. So, what are the key activities or the key roles that has been envisioned for the leader is he is a person who is going to see what kind of strategy is to be adopted in the future, and that is why leadership or the top management role is very important in identifying what kind of a strategy is to be used by the organization, right. So, when it comes to a strategic decision, the leadership role is very important, because the top management which is responsible for identifying the strategy for the organization, right. And then they are going to see that how they are going to align organizational activities to ensure that this strategy is going to work successfully for the organization, right. And accordingly, what kind of changes is to be brought in, because strategic changes brings changes in the culture, maybe in the structure also. So, accompanying changes which comes out of strategic changes need also to be ensured by the leadership to ensure that it is going to be successful. Now, if you look at the middle managers, they are not responsible for strategic changes. Their job is to execute these strategies, right. So, the middle managers also play a very important role in leading the change, not about identifying the strategies. So, the top management is responsible for identifying the strategies, and the middle managers are responsible for executing and implementing those strategies at the organization levels, right. So, the leadership is also important. Moving further, what are the different kind of leadership that is adopted by the organizations, right. It could be more situational in the sense depending upon the requirement, right. So, strategic leaders basically try to adjust their leadership style depending upon the context. You remember we talked about the context earlier. So, the context is very important depending upon the time, scope, power dynamics, right, capability of the organization, capability of the people. You decide how you are going to face the changes that you want to bring about, right, and what kind of a strategy you want to bring to enable the change. So, the two theories that have been identified here is theory E and theory O. Theory E basically talks about economic value, right. So, the economic value theory talks about that any change that you want to bring in structure, system or any kind of thing, whether it is going to be of some economic value. So, you are basically talking about the utility perspective. It means that any change must bring some economic return to the organization, right. Theory O talks about the development or organizational capability perspective, which says that when you are trying to bring about a change in the culture or go for some kind of experimentations related to R&D, basically you want to increase the capability of the organization to face the challenges better. So, both are applied. So, you can use both the economic perspective as well as the capability perspective to ensure that the leadership which has initiated any strategic change is going to be successful. Now, another kind of change that is brought in the organization is especially related to the cultural changes. So, we have been talking about structural changes, strategic changes, right, HR related changes, capability changes and also the leadership changes. In that continuation, the change in the culture is also very important. So, when we are talking about bringing about a change in the culture, and I gave an example of State Bank of India, that how cultural transformation helped the company to be more productive and efficient. So, when you are talking about cultural changes, the idea is that what kind of changes you need to bring about in the values, in the attitude, beliefs and behavior of the people, right. So, basically here you think that yes, this is how the employees think, this is what is their mindset and what kind of mind change you need to bring in the people, right. So, you are not thinking about the bringing about a change in the technology structure and the product, but you simply want to bring about a change in the people and their mindset to ensure that productivity and efficiency is achieved. Now, we will take up some examples of different kind of changes that organizations go through, like downsizing, right. Downsizing is also renamed as right sizing, right, because many people understand that downsizing is a term which is more derogatory in nature. So, the term that is used today is right sizing, but the meaning is same. We are trying to reduce certain things. It could be basically related to the head count. So, if you are going to reduce the number of people in the organization, so it is related to downsizing. So, for that you go for maybe reducing the number of levels in the organizations, closing down certain units and departments, so that you can go for downsizing, right. So, downsizing is related to bring about a change in the structure, right. It could be also people related changes, like when you are talking about retrenchment. So, retrenchment happens because you are not productive enough, right. There is no job for the people and that is why you go for retrenchment. So, this is related to what you call retrenchment, reducing the head count in the organization. Then downscaling. Downscaling is related to scope in the market. Since there is less demand for the product in the market, so you want to reduce the production. So, that is what we call downscaling. So, you are scaling down your products and services, so that you are able to meet the requirement, because the requirement is less. So, you need to produce less. Then the third term is downscoping, the scope of activities that you have been performing, you also want to reduce. So, this is also a part of what we call downsizing, right. So, any effort of downsizing, not necessarily that it is done to increase the productivity. The basic objective of downsizing is to cut the cost. So, any exercise related to retrenchment, downscaling and downscoping is done to reduce the cost. Say for example, most of the organizations have gone to downscoping, that is, instead of working for 5 days, they have created 4 days work week. So, that they produce less. So, number of activities which they are going to perform is going to be less in 4 days compared to 5 days or 6 days, right. So, it is an effort which you relate with downscoping, which basically a part of downsizing only. The idea is to reduce the cost, right. So, all these efforts, whether it is downscaling, downscoping or retrenchment, all part of what you call changes, right, with the objective to reduce the cost. Now, look at what we had discussed just now. The key challenges relate to downscoping, downsizing, new technologies and mergers and acquisitions. What actually happens in downsizing, right? Downsizing basically is related to employee retention. Who is going to be left out? Who is going to be part of the organization, right? So, avoiding hard landing. So, you do not want to go to take up some other decision. You want to bring about changes in other activities, in products, technology or structure. So, basically it is a soft approach. We are trying to see that how cutting the number of the people in the organization can bring down the cost, though it could be a wrong approach as well. So, this also is done to minimize the political behavior, or and then there is a survivor syndrome. So, those who are left out in the organization after the retrenchment, so they think that how long they are going to survive in this organization, because there is a retrenchment that is going on a continuous basis, okay, because the company is going for downsizing. So, it creates some kind of anxiety among those who are going to work for the company. Then the communication is very important, whether you communicate about downsizing or not to the people, because if you do not communicate effectively and also identify the reason for going to downsizing, then it may create certain problem. Then it must be done with due diligence, so that people are not going to be adversely affected and do not react to these kind of changes that is brought in the organization. Then you also need to bring about some cultural adjustments. See, most of the companies are going for downsizing today, okay, and trying to reduce the number to cut the cost on people related aspects, right. So, any kind of adjustments that need to be made to see that the attitude, the behavior, the expectations of the people are met through that, and how they are going to be those who are going to live with the company are going to adjust their norms and values with and align with the company's value system. Then you also look at what are the other restructuring techniques that the company is adopted. So, downsizing has other aspects that like those who are going to be left out, those who are going to be out of this organization, are you going to do something for them in terms of their rehabilitation, redeployment. So, these are the issues or the challenges which may come with downsizing. Similarly, with the new technology, what kind of technology you want to bring it? Is there any political barriers which are there, right? How IT team is going to align it with the production system, how you are going to communicate it, what is the time frame to bring the new technology, right, and whether you have any contingency plan. For example, if the new technology is not working effectively, then what to do, how are you going to continue with production. So, must have a contingency plan. Then coming to the mergers acquisitions. So, mergers acquisitions basically the objective is what? So, that you can save cost on certain activities, and you are going to be less dependent on resources, right. So, you also go for cultural adjustments, because two companies when they merge together having different cultures, they need to align their culture with each other, so that it is going to be more productive, right. And then you have to say that when you are going to merge or acquire a company, so you need to continue your job and doing your job or being productive as usual as you have been in the past. Plus, you also need to see that how you are going to balance the new change that you have brought in while continuing your products and services, right. And any mergers acquisition must be done with due diligence. It means, you must be very careful about it when you are going to acquire a company, and that is why companies go for due diligence, in the sense that at different stages of mergers and acquisitions, say pre-merger, merger and post-merger stages, they need to ensure that it happens successfully. Because you know that if it is not taken care at each stage, there is every possibility that most of these mergers and acquisitions do not succeed. Then after mergers and acquisitions, there are certain issues related to the retention of the employees, right. Whether you are going to retain all the employees or you are going to throw some of them out, right. And if it does not succeed, then what will happen? What kind of contingency plan you have? And how are you going to balance the power structure? Because you cannot have two managers for the similar position, right. And this might happen in any kind of mergers and acquisitions. And then finally, the communication. Are you communicating with your stakeholders what you are going to do exactly in terms of mergers and acquisitions? Thank you very much.